بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وآله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين اللهم ربنا أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي ربنا زدنا علما وعملا وإخلاصا يا رب العالمين اللهم انصر أولياءك في غزة وفي لبنان وفي اليمن وفي مشارق الأرض ومغاربها اللهم انصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم إنك على كل شيء قدير اللهم فرج عنا وعن إخواننا في غزة وفي شمال غزة وفي جباليا وفي الضفة وفي لبنان وفي اليمن وفي مشارق الأرض ومغاربها اللهم نفس كربنا وكربهم وثبت أقدامنا وأقدامهم والطف بنا وبهم يا أرحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين اللهم اغفر شهدانا اللهم اغفر شهدانا اللهم اغفر شهدانا وموتانا اللهم ارحم موتانا اللهم اشف جرحانا ومرضانا وفك أسرانا واصلح كل ذا فاسد من أمور المسلمين يا رب العالمين وصل وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذريته وإترته وإخوانه وأنصاره إلى يوم الدين أجمعين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين آمين يا رب العالمين. So, Zeno of Elea, one of the Eleatic philosophers, so-called Greek philosopher, in the sense that I don't know whether he was actually Greek, but he did belong to the Greek world, disciple of Parmenides. Parmenides, alongside Heraclitus, is one of the two main philosophers among pre-Socratics, and Plato was hugely influenced by Parmenides. In a sense, we can say that Plato was a disciple. Plato was also a disciple of Parmenides. But what Plato tried to do was to reconcile the basic insights of Parmenides with the basic insights or the objections of Heraclitus. So, in a way, he was a disciple of Parmenides who took the objection of Heracliteans seriously. Okay. But this is just a side note. So, Greek philosopher, disciple of Parmenides, in pursuing Parmenides' rejection of change. So, Parmenides So in what sense Parmenides rejected change? Obviously, he can't deny that there is change. Yeah, so there is change, but he denied change. How does he reconcile it? These two facts that we do see change. But he denied change. So how do you make sense of that? I think one way to make sense of this is to, I don't know whether he invented this distinction. For sure he didn't. It's something which probably is as old as human beings. The distinction between appearance and reality. So the distinction between appearance and reality. So what he said was that it changes only appearance. It appears to us that things are changing, but in reality, things are not. changing. Things are unchanged. Things are stationary. Um, Obviously, you can play this distinction in how you conceptualize the basic dictum of Parmenides uh, that changes an illusion and the reality is stationary. And since we don't have we only have few sayings of Parmenides, we don't have his books and things, so we can't say how he argued about those things, but his disciples did. So, for example, he could say, so the basic distinction is appearance and reality. So, for example, we see illusions. We experience illusions where things appear certain way, but on inspection it turns out that they are not as they seem in reality. For example, mirage, um, you know, which is experienced in certain conditions. But on close inspection, we see that mirages are what they are. They are optical illusions caused by atmospheric conditions. So, in our experience, there is a basis for the distinction between appearance and reality, and there is a basis for saying that what appears to us to be might not be as it appears to be, and the reality might be totally different from what appears to be. Although, in order to claim that the change is an illusion, you have to make a much more drastic claim, because mirages and optical illusions are exceptions. They are not rare. They are rare. They are not the rule. On the other hand, change is, we can't say that change is an exception. So that's a possible objection against those philosophers, not just Parmenides, but modern philosophers who take in their epistemology illusions as something foundational and try to overcome it. For example, even the objection against them is that illusions are exceptions; they are rare. So we can't base our whole idea of reality as if illusions were universal. Okay, it's like basing our life as if it was a dream, and dreams are very limited part of our experience, for example, and wakefulness or being awake and being non-dreaming in a non-dreaming condition seems to be more universal. So that's a possible objection against it. But anyway, I just wanted to give an idea of where they are coming from. So Zeno advanced several arguments involving paradox to reject the possibility of plurality and motion. Another important insight of Parmenides was that reality is one. So there's a one reality, and so in that sense it not only denies motion but also plurality. So we see plurality, for example. We see nature, we see tree, we see animals, we see human beings, we see rocks, we see trees. These are plurality of things. Um, Parmenides would say that the plurality is either illusion or underneath that appearance, even if it is not an illusion, there is one reality. So that's a bit more defendable concepts, even given our modern sciences, because at the end of the day, science, modern physics, also tells us that everything is made of atom and subatomic material, for example. Although there's still a debate between those who think that mind is a function of our physical structure, or mind is in the Cartesian vein, a totally different entity. So there is a dualism of mind and matter. So in that case, there would be at least two realities. But Parmenides thought that there was one reality, and that reality was in that sense he rejected plurality as well as the something real. It might be apparent. So in that sense, Parmenides is a monist. He believes that reality is one. And there are many ways in which you can spin this doctrine. For example, um, you know, Hegel's doctrine is also, in a sense, monism, but a different one. So for Hegel, reality is one. It is Geist, which is manifesting itself in different ways. So that's one way in which you can say that reality is one, but it is developing and it's manifesting itself in different ways. But there are many other ways in which this doctrine can be spun. Okay, so these arguments involve fundamental concepts such as time. So Zeno advanced several arguments involving paradoxes to reject the possibility of plurality in motion. So what Zeno is famous for is he develops certain logical paradoxes to show that if we believe that there is plurality, and if we believe that there are motions, then it involves us into a paradox. And paradoxes, since it involves us to absurd paradoxes, we must reject that there's a motion or there is a plurality. And at most, what we can say that plurality and motions are apparent. We'll discuss those paradoxes separately, so we don't need to it doesn't need to detain us here. So these arguments involve fundamental concepts such as time, because change happens in time, as space and change happens, or motion happens through time. Infinity and divisibility, because in order to have motion, we need to go from one place to another. So it involves divisibility, infinity, and divisibility and indivisibility. They're also essential for plurality of things. Any space, if there are plurality of things, then there is a distance, there is space between things, and there is a relation between things. Some people say space is separate. So the question arises whether space is separate from things, the sense that it is a container, for example, or space is just something which emerges out of the relationship between things. So these are two views. and it's not something separate. Similarly, there are views about time, that whether time is something independent, self-sufficient, or time emerges out of the relationship between between things, and what's the relationship between time and changes and important aspects which Aristotle talks about and which other philosophers have talked about to our own day. For example, Sidney Shoemaker, he has a famous paper on that. We might read it at some point. These arguments involve fundamental concepts such as time, space, infinity, and divisibility, and demonstrate the power of speculative reasoning. Speculative reasoning. It's speculative reasoning in the sense that paradoxes are developed on the basis of reasoning alone. Uh, and it is speculative in the sense that it involves. Here's one way of describing speculative reasoning. Speculative reasoning is a way of thinking. That's one way describe way of thinking that uses different ways of knowing, thinking, imagining, to challenge dominant ideas, and uncovers new insights. So, and it involves counterfactuals, I guess. It involves alternatives, ways of thinking or imagining. So, for example, if the dominant way of thinking is that there is motion, you imagine ways in which motion might involve something contradictory, something which is absurd, etc. Okay. So Zeno's arguments, which are known through Aristotle's discussion of them, still excite the interest of philosophers and mathematicians. Because even though they might be very theoretical, they at least help us develop techniques and different distinctions in thinking and reasoning, which are important for philosophers, logicians, as well as mathematicians. Because the basic concepts involve physics, mathematics, like space, time, divisibility, indivisibility, finite, infinite, etc. So next time we'll look at actual paradoxes, and then we'll define paradox as well. What is a paradox, etc. Okay, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. آمين.